This week's Parashat Bechukotai is the last Parasha of the book of Vayikra, and it contains what's known as the Tochacha, the blessing and the curse, the admonition, chapter 26. First, the blessings that will accrue to Israel if they keep the covenant, keep the commandments, hear God's voice and follow it. And conversely, if they don't, we have the longer admonition, or the negative things that will befall Israel. And of course, at the core of it is exile. And what's interesting about this admonition is that though the Torah speaks in generalities about not keeping the Torah, there is one particular mitzvah that the Torah singles out. The failure to observe results in exile, and that is the sabbatical year, the Shemitah, which was mentioned in last week's Parashat Bahar. God spoke to Moshe at Bahar Sinai, and what follows there are the rules of the sabbatical year and the Jubilee year and a set of attendant laws. And then in chapter 26, when the Torah talks about going into exile, talks in generalities, violation of the covenant, but it singles out on more than one occasion the failure to observe the Sabbath year. For example, chapter 26, verse number 34. Verse 33 says the land will be desolate. Oz tirtzeh haaretz et shabtoteha kol yemei hashama v'atem be'eretz oivechem. Oz tishbat haaretz v'ritzat et shabtoteha kol yemei hashama tishbot et asher lo shavta b'shabtotechem b'shivtechem oleha. The land will lie desolate. Then the Torah says the land will pay back, make up for the Sabbath years as it lies desolate, and you're in the end of your enemy. Then the land will rest and make up the Sabbath years. All the years of its desolation it shall rest, that which it did not rest when you dwelt upon the land. So it's explicit that the failure to observe the Sabbath year results in exile, and the desolation of the land is a payment for the sabbaticals you didn't keep. And actually the Torah revisits this towards the end of the chapter in verse number 43. V'aretz te'ozeh mehem b'tiretz et shabtotel. Again, in verse 43, once again, the land will be abandoned by them and pay back its Sabbath years. So it's interesting, the Torah singled out the Shemitah, the Sabbath of the land, not as the sole commandment, but as a commandment that represents all commandments. And in a sense, not surprising that it do so, given the fact that in the previous book, in the book of Exodus, the Sabbath was singled out as the covenantal commandment. It appears not only in the Ten Commandments, it appears twice in conjunction with the building of the Mishkan, the tabernacle. It appears in conjunction with the manna that rained from heaven. So here too, in speaking about the covenant, it singled out, the Torah singled out the Sabbath of the land. So what we have over here, and Nachmanides, the Ramban, makes this point, that essentially this covenant which is spoken of as blessings and curses, this covenant is in a sense a clinching, a finalization of the covenant of Sinai. The covenant of Sinai, Har Sinai, there was a covenant, not just a set of laws, but a covenant. The tablets were the tablets of the covenant. After the golden calf episode, Moses descends from the mountain, and the people are dancing around the golden calf. In a sense, the covenant has been broken. And therein begins a process of restoration, which concludes not with the end of the book of Exodus, with the second tablets, but Nachmanides argues concludes at the end of the book of Vayikra, the end of our book, where the covenant is reformulated in terms of blessings and curses. And the Torah singled out one particular commandment, the Sabbath of the land, upon which to base the covenant, upon which to base the contract between God and Israel. And here it's interesting that in order to return to the land, because the Torah promises that God will bring us back, there are three things, three aspects, three elements to return. The last of which is I will remember the covenant, God says. God remembers the covenant made when we left the land of Egypt. The Torah speaks also of confession. They will confess, they'll recognize what's wrong. And thirdly, and finally, paying back the debt. You repay the debt. If you repay the debt, recognize what's wrong, in light of the covenant, God brings us back. And here the point, I think, is that the covenant of Vayikra, which is essentially the finalization of the covenant of Sinai, is a covenant that is made with the slaves who left Egypt. It's not the covenant made with actually free people in the sense of fully being free. They are physically free, but they still have the slave mentality. The Torah demands of Israel in this chapter recognition of sin and payment of debt. And in light of prior commitments, God will bring us back. This is the covenant of this week's Torah reading, and the representative commandment is the sabbatical year. It's what you're not allowed to take. It's the Shabbat. Later, the Torah will have a second covenant in the book of Devarim, and that's a different covenant. That's now a covenant made with the slaves who left Egypt. That's a covenant made with the children of those slaves who were never slaves, who were free people. As free people, they have the ability to make choices. They don't require that God drag them back out of exile. They're able to initiate a process where they can themselves begin to return. Now, I would say in conclusion that these two covenants, which address two different audiences, but actually, no doubt in our own lives, sometimes we find ourselves in the position of those that enter the covenant in the book of Vayikra, that is, those who left Egypt. There are many situations in life where we don't actually have control. And sometimes we simply have to some extent, accept the givens. And there are other times in life when we feel that we have real choice, real opportunity to make choices, and the freedom to choose. So the Torah offers us two different scenarios, two different covenants that God has made with Israel, and two different audiences that are Israel. The audience of Vayikra is the audience of the slaves, or the former slaves. They can't fully return on their own, but they can make decisions which allow for God to initiate the process, repayment and recognition. And that's often how we are in our own situations. And then sometimes we find ourselves in a different place, in the place of the children of these people, free to make choices, have a sense that we have the power to determine our own path. And that's the second covenant of the Torah of the plains of Moab. Shabbat Shalom.